Alors, bonsoir. Merci d'être resté jusqu'à la fin du film. J'espère que
Good
ça va
evening,
donner
and
quelques
thank
idées
you for staying
et
until
quelques
the end of
bonnes
the film.
réflexions. On a
I hope,
trois moments
it gave you
devant
some food for thought.
nous.
Then we'll have
We're
three
gonna
different
do some
events.
English, some French, some Russian. So if you have your translation headsets, on va faire un peu de français, un peu de russe, anglais. Donc peut-être vous avez besoin de vos casques de traduction.
Don't forget your translation headsets.
Le premier sera assez bref. Il y a le maire de Genève qui va venir.
So first of all, we'll have the mayor of Geneva,
les plans pour
who will join us
le digital à
and
Genève pendant
explain to us the digital strategy for Geneva, and then we'll have a video
localité qu'on ne peut
conference
pas vraiment révéler. Avec Alexandra Elbakian, qui est une
with
activiste
Alexandra Elbakian, who is a Kazakh activist.
est celle qui a fondé un site de diffusion de connaissances scientifiques qui
She
s'appelle Sci-Hub.
founded a
Pas
scientific
tout à fait légal.
knowledge
On discutera un peu de ça.
website called Sci-Hub. It's not 100% legal, but the idea is to disclose scientific publications to the widest number for free. And then we'll have two guests
le hackathon qui s'est passé ici
on
même,
open source and on the hackathon that took place today. Several teams took part in this hackathon, and the objective was to use technology for human rights. I would like to bid a very warm welcome to the Mayor of Geneva, Sami Kanan.
Merci beaucoup Bruno Giussani. Bonsoir à toutes et tous.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Full disclosure, I am no geek. I am not an early adopter by any means. And just like many of you, I am just a citizen. I try to understand what is happening in the world. Of course, I use a computer, I use a smartphone, and apps is very useful. And I'm starting to realize that my own digital existence is quite strong, and I leave traces of my presence. Recently, I was at a conference in London, and one of the speakers was a computer, Deep Blue, the computer that beat Kasparov at chess. Deep Blue was given the list of participants to that conference, young and old. And this computer has access to the internet. And in a couple of seconds, it collected all the public information available on all the participants at that conference without hacking anything. And he put all of this information online in front of all the participants. And many of us were surprised because we didn't realize all the traces that we leave on the internet can be pictures, stories, CVs. I think we all agree on the fact that the internet is a wonderful tool. It has been a very positive invention, very often compared to older technologies such as the road network, the highway network. Road networks can be very useful, and it can also be very cumbersome. There are rules on the road that are not always respected. You can circulate, you can go from point A to point B, you can walk, you can ride a bike, you can drive a car or take a bus, but there's also pollution and downsides to it. The internet is not as well regulated as the road network today. There are abuses of power
de contrôle ou de prise de contrôle.
For political reasons or economic reasons. And on the internet, there is a form of class struggle. There are those who have the means to protect their digital identity or to have access to better quality services. We know that net neutrality is at risk these days for various reasons, political or economic ones. So we have a struggle to fight. Those who are powerful on the internet, we all know them, the GAFA, among others. But what's also positive about the internet is that there is a global debate about it. And the real challenge is that those who have the power to regulate the internet, in the positive sense of the term, which means discuss these potential regulations and then vote avoid them through legislation. Most of them, it's European states. And these states tend to be overwhelmed because if there is a proposal, for example, put forward at the Swiss Parliament, there's someone who will say, well, decisions are made at a higher level. And at the European scale, then a discussion can take place. We can federate people. There are people who understand what is happening on the internet. For example, there's the use of and abuse of algorithms, and Facebook and others, that gathers people by interests. It's never been the case ever in the world that people are gathered in groups by affinity, by interests. You know, there's a group of people who believe that the Earth is flat. So these people met through the internet, got to know one another through the internet, and the Facebook algorithm make them see only content that reinforces their ideas. So they end up believing that the Earth is flat, and anyone who tells them otherwise is lying. You know, we could take them on a spaceship, have a look at the Earth from above, and they would still not believe in you. There's a very interesting documentary on Netflix about this, and the documentary comes down to the conclusion that these people are just looking for a sense of belonging. Algorithms, I've noticed on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram that I'm being proposed content that is very similar to my own idea. So we need to recreate this net neutrality, political, commercial neutrality. We need to establish transparent rules for the game. In Geneva, things are a little bit different. We very often talk about the International Geneva. It's not just a myth. It's a reality and it's a responsibility. In Geneva, we have all the resources at hand to do something about it, and we have responsibilities. Last December, we celebrated the 70th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights. And this Declaration of Human Rights is a fundamental text that needs to be respected. If you look at human rights, states are failing to respect them. They are either failed or reactionary. So what do we have left? Civil society, NGOs, communities, and cities. Cities are the entities that have reacted the strongest against Trump. Same thing in Italy. Mayors are the ones speaking up. I'm not saying that mayors can change the world on their own, but along with other partners, NGOs, civil society, and academia can spearhead transparency and equality. In Geneva, we have all the tools in our hands to make this discussion in reality. So I would like to propose to our international partners to create a joint foundation here in Geneva to define the rules of the game, global rules of the game that would also be applicable locally. We need to create such a structure as quickly as possible. We need it. We need to foster the exchange of competencies, open data. And in Geneva, you know, we're not ahead of the game as a city. I will soon put forward a digital transition strategy like Helsinki, like Brussels, like Lyon did it. It needs to be accessible to the run-of-the-mill citizen. I would like to also create in Geneva a popular university for digital technologies. You know that such universities allow people who have not had the chance to study at university to acquire knowledge. And we've already set up something in that direction, and we are working on pedagogy and various projects. We need to find the right balance between the local level and global level. We need a foundation that defines a transparent, common and shared rules from the internet, and at local level, at human scale, we need to ensure that everyone can get involved in the discussion and be a digital citizen in a positive, complete and transparent fashion. I'm sure you'll have a fascinating discussion after this. Bruno, I hand the mic over to you, and I wish you a very good evening. Thank you. That's quite paradoxical, right? That Geneva, which is where the web was created, be lagging behind on the internet.
One of the big questions about openness is about access to information. And one of the big issues when it comes to access of information is about accessing scientific information. We could frame the question this way. On one side, there are proponents of open access. Basically, they argue that scientific knowledge should be available to all, freely or as freely as possible. Putting it up behind paywalls slows down scientific process, makes it not accessible to, for example, poorer universities or researchers in emerging countries. And that also means that because often research is paid with taxpayer money, it ends up being paid 3 times. First, the scientists supported by public money do the research. Then they are not paid to write the article that describes the research, and then they have to pay the publishers of scientific journals to access that research. So that's one side. The other side is the side of the publishers, who do make a profit out of publishing that research. And of course, they argue that their role as the middleman adds a lot of value. Think just of the peer review process, for example, which is an argument that can stand. The reality, however, is that scientific journals cost a lot of money to subscribe to. They can cost several $1,000s per year. Single articles can cost up to $30 a piece to download and read. And there are thousands, tens of thousands, millions of articles published every year. So keeping up with all that is really expensive, particularly if you are not working for an institution that has significant capital available and capacity to subscribe to these publications. Now, a woman who is on a mission to make the world's science knowledge more accessible, possibly completely accessible, is Alexandra Elbakyan. She's from Kazakhstan, and 8 years ago she started a site called Sci-Hub, which right now hosts over 60 million academic and scientific papers and books free to download. She's by training a neuroscience researcher. She has done a few other things in the scientific space, and she's clearly a hero to the open access movement. And she should be now with us from a location we cannot disclose on video conference. Alexandra, are you there? Hi, Alexandra. How are you?
Fine.
Fine. Good. Do you want to answer in English or in Russian?
Я, наверное, по-русски буду говорить.
Okay, there's going to be Russian, so I need a headset too. And while I get my headset, Alexandra, why don't you start by telling us
so I'm going to take a headset as well.
Briefly
While I'm
you
putting
felt
my
the
headset
need to
on,
start
Alessandro,
8 years
could
ago
you
Science
please tell us what made you want to launch
Ну, мне просто
Sci-Hub
как-то
at USP?
хотелось то есть автоматизировать процесс открывания научных статей. Ну, просто пришла в голову интересная идея, как это можно сделать. Я села и запрограммировала.
Scientific publication process. That's an idea came to my mind, and I created a program for that.
That was it, nothing else. So my understanding is at the beginning you actually, I need to talk there because the camera is there. At the beginning you were just trying to get access for yourself to scientific articles. The project was not to liberate Wall of Science knowledge, it was to facilitate access for yourself and some friends. Is that correct?
В 2009 году я впервые, когда работала над своим дипломом, столкнулась с проблемой
when I was working on my
того,
diploma,
что научные
I came
статьи
across
были
that
мне недоступны,
problem.
которые были мне необходимы для
Scientific
диплома.
publications were not available, at least those that I
Вот.
needed for my diploma.
А годика через 2, ну, я уже тогда думала, что почему бы не написать какую-то программу,
After 2
которая,
years, I
с
started
помощью которой
thinking,
можно
why
будет
shouldn't I
скачивать
write a
как-то
program
автоматически,
that would give me automatic access to these articles?
как это должно будет выглядеть.
I'm going to ask the team to lower the volume of the Russian in the room just a little bit so it doesn't interfere with what we are hearing on the headset. Alexandra, okay, so you shift your attention from trying to access that information for yourself to trying to make it, try to make scientific knowledge available. Tell us about your philosophy for doing that, your overall political thinking about why is that a thing that should be done?
Ну, как сказать? Я считаю, что я, в принципе, свою
How can I
философию
put it?
еще формирую.
I'm still defining my philosophy.
Ну, так, конечно, я разделяю, как бы убеждена в том, что знания должны распространяться свободно.
Of course, I am convinced that knowledge should be available to all.
Вот, что это приведет к ускорению науки, к ускорению прогресса.
Progress is now more and more rapid,
Ну и в целом, как бы, люди, они
and scientific discoveries as well.
полетит в космос, изобретет что-нибудь.
People and mankind at large will be able to develop and survive this way.
Do you see publishers as the... I'm confused myself now. Alexandra, do you see publishers as the only obstacle, or that you see also laws, like copyright laws, as the obstacles to freedom of access to information?
Ну, копирайт — это, собственно, та система интеллектуальной собственности.
Copyrights are the basis of the IP system.
Возможно, это ситуация, когда крупные научные издательства, они стали собственниками.
The system that helped large publishing houses become the owners of scientific knowledge.
How you got hold of 60 million papers?
Excuse me?
What can you tell us about how did you get hold of 60 million papers?
Skyhub автоматически скачивает, это скрипт, который автоматически скачивает научные статьи. И за несколько лет
Sci-Hub looks automatically for scientific publications, and after a few years, it gathered dozens of millions of scientific publications.
Your system probes different ways of access databases from all over the world and just downloads.
Ну, в основном Sci-Hub качает научные статьи через прокси университета.
Sci-Hub gathers scientific publications through university libraries.
Because basically you're running a site that is considered heresy by a lot of powerful organizations, publishers, governments, intelligence agencies, and others. And yet we have managed to keep it up and running. There are ways to, hide a website somewhere in the corners of the internet, shut down domain names, etc. Tell us a little bit about how you managed to keep this thing up despite all these powerful enemies.
Ну, что касается государств, то я не уверена,
Well, as for the states,
являются какими-то основными врагами, потому что государство, как мне кажется, наоборот.
I wouldn't say that they are my enemies, because I think it's in the interest of any country to give access to scientific information to their citizens. especially as these publications have been paid by taxpayers.
To be clear, what you're doing is not legal. The copyright is owned by the publisher. And indeed, there has been legal actions against you. Elsevier, the biggest publisher, has sued you. The American Chemical Society has done the same. You were asked to pay multi-million-dollar fines and damages, and there have been other measures. Tell us a little bit how these lawsuits have impacted Sci-Hub.
Ну, насколько я знаю, было в Соединенных Штатах два судебных
As far as I know,
от издательства Elsevier и потом от американского химического
two inquiries have been made by Elsevier, and then also another one by the American Chemicals Association.
Они не присутствовали, ну, то есть мы не присутствовали, и суд выносил решение по умолчанию.
Sci-Hub wasn't represented at these lawsuits, and the court ruled in favor of the publishers. That depressed me quite a lot, because I think we should at least have a discussion on the fact that knowledge needs to be made available to the public. It's unfair to it's unfair that these publishers win such a trial. So the court ruled in favor of these publishers, and that's it. What impact did it have? Well, in 2016, Sci-Hub was shut down by the German authorities, and then we had an alternative solution. In 2017, 2018, Sci-Hub and Cloudware refused to collaborate with Sci-Hub. This is how we fall for our website. And now another company, an American court forbade American companies to collaborate with Sci-Hub. It didn't have any other impact on our work, but from the fact that according to American laws, well, if I step foot on American soil, I have to pay a fine of $15 million.
Pretty expensive flight ticket. Alexandra, publishers argue that they actually do add value to the process, to science papers. They do things like editing, peer review, promotion of the results of science, etc. Do you acknowledge that publishers do add value and therefore deserve to be paid something?
Yes, of course. There's a whole process, and it's a strong argument.
Sorry about that.
It can give the impression that scientific publications are going to die out because they're starving, but it's not the case. If you look at the profitability of these companies, they are highly profitable. They are much more profitable than Apple and Microsoft or the banking sector. And if we look closely, we can see that scientific publications that were published first 5 or 10 years ago, they are still not in open access. These older publications should be made available. But publishing houses are making huge sums of money by preventing people to have access to knowledge.
Of the open access movement, which doesn't always agree with you. And these are groups, for example, that try to push for a change in the law or a change in the rules of the game, and they have had some success. There are now open access repositories and archives. There are open access journals like the Public Library of Science. A few years under President Obama, the US government has mandated that all the science funded by US federal money may be made available after 12 months for free to everyone. Those are all steps in the right direction, no?
Ну, в определенном смысле, конечно, да, открытый это
To some extent, yeah.
будет выходить в открытом доступе, а это лучше, чем если она
Open data is, of course, much better than knowledge that is non-accessible.
нужно было бы решать данную проблему.
The only drawback here is that this problem should have been solved much earlier in a much simpler way. We should have given up on IP
Alexander,
and copyright.
There was another champion of free access. His name was Aaron Swartz. He has participated in many technical developments of the web, RSS, Creative Commons, etc. And then in 2013 did something like you're doing. He downloaded 4.8 million scientific papers. Although it did not redistribute them, and actually the publisher withdrew the lawsuit after they came to an agreement. But there was so much pressure on him from US prosecutors threatening him with prison for 35 years that he took his own life. I assume you know a little bit his story. What is the difference between your way of doing things and his way of doing things?
Так. Ну там достаточно как бы глобальные различия. Я бы скорее сказала, что тут
The main
действительно
difference
намного легче
between
сказать, в
us.
чем сходство, чем сказать, в чем отличие, потому что, ну, понимаете...
Well, it's actually easier to say, to talk about what we have in common, that what are differences.
Журнал
You said yourself
доступа, Public Library of Science.
that there are publications in open access, which is the public library,
На этом сайте можно
and what they do is similar to Sci-Hub. On that website, you can read scientific publications. It's something we have in common, but there are differences as well.
What can you tell us about who and from where the people who use Sci-Hub come? Give us a little bit of a cartography of the usage of Sci-Hub.
Ну, вот последняя статистика, сейчас скажу. Вот, ну, это
According to the
стран
latest
по углам.
statistics,
Вот Китай, Индия, Бразилия, Индонезия,
it's China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, the US,
потом Франция,
Iran, and then
Мексика,
France,
Испания и Россия.
Mexico, Spain, Russia, Malaysia, Germany.
Скачивают больше всего
Those are the
литературу. Ну,
countries
на первых местах Китай и
that
Индия. Ну, я думаю, это первые
download literature from our website. It's mostly China and India, of course, because they are very populous countries.
доказывают, что США вот находится на также в топ-5 стран, которые качают научные статьи на Sci-Hub.
There are also plenty of people who are trying to prove that the US are amongst the first 5 main users of Sci-Hub. Well,
Ну, не знаю. Так как вот Sci-Hub, ну,
there are many people in the US who use proxies. So we don't record information on our users. Everything is anonymous on our website. So we don't know who's downloading. I don't know why users would use a proxy.
И вот я, кстати, надо сказать, что
Because in most countries, Sci-Hub is
почему-то
widely available.
часто я вижу научные статьи, ну, которые опубликованы вот в каких-то научных журналах.
And actually, I very often see articles being published that are incorrect. Scientific articles about Sci-Hub that are incorrect. I read recently on scientific publication that Sci-Hub was blocked in China, which is not the case.
Alex, tell us a little bit, what do you see about the future of Sci-Hub? You're keeping this site alive, you keep feeding it new papers, of course, so it keeps growing. How do you see the future of the platform and the service? Some think is a service, some think is something illegal. The service that it provides.
Ну, во-первых, я очень надеюсь Sci-Hub легализовать.
Well, first of all, I hope very much that Sci-Hub will become legal, and that all the work that we've done on it will become legal everywhere. That will mean that we'll have reached our objectives. In terms of technical improvements, of course, Sci-Hub can improve a lot. There's much to do.
And, well, I wish you to continue your work, but also to take it in more legal and conventional spaces. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Спасибо. До свидания.
Thank you. Bye.
And before we move on, I want to thank, and I think we need a big applause, the translators, because here is what happened. Until 2 hours and a half ago, we did not know that this interview would take place in Russian. And they came in at the very last minute, completely unprepared. And so a big applause for the two translators, please. Okay, now for the final segment of this session, I would like to invite two other people to join me, Thomas Maillard and Charles Foucault-Dumas, and we're going to switch to French. Voilà, on a deux micros. Merci beaucoup. Thomas Maillard, maître d'enseignement et recherche à l'Université de Genève, président de Open Geneva. Charles Foucault-Dumas, directeur de Empowerment Foundation à Lausanne.
The University of Geneva, Charles Foucault-Dumas from the University of Lausanne. Today, on the ground floor, we organize a hackathon. We're going to talk about it in a minute. The objective was to put technology at the service of human rights. But first of all, Thomas, can you tell us about Open Geneva? Well, Open Geneva is an association that was created a year and a half ago, and that promotes open innovation. That's innovation that aims at being shared, about which a contradictory debate will be held, and that will be done together. It can be done simultaneously. You can exchange, share knowledge and debate. Can you give us a definition of open source? I'm sure that we will hear better definitions, but the objective, the idea is that people share knowledge one way or another.
En termes de licences, mais il existe en fait des
dizaines approach to it, but there are dozens of different licenses. There's a whole spectrum, a very wide spectrum for open source, and there are also social practices that are different. There's an MIT professor, Eric Funapol, who realized that most of the population practices open innovation without even knowing it. We have farmers that develop technologies in their farms and they show it to a company that will make a product from it and then sell it to other farmers. And Eric Funapol showed that innovation that people came about with in their own garage, in their farm, along with neighbors, accounted for dozens of GDP points, but it's never taken into account when we analyze R&D in the various countries, which takes into account public and private research. Do you want to add something to it? Well, unfortunately, this goes under the radar. When we talk about open source, we talk about either software or scientific knowledge, but we don't talk about anything else. But it's actually something very wide that concerns all sectors. Absolutely. I'm talking about farmers because I come from a farm myself, and I remember my uncle telling me, "Oh, look, I've created this tool and I showed it to the tractor company." And then when I first met Eric Van Appel, I thought that my uncle got ripped off, because he was very proud to show the industrialist his invention, and the industrialist made a great product from it and sold it very expensive for a lot of money to other farmers. You are studying collective organizations, and how can open access contribute to human rights? Well, I'm going to give you quite a strange answer. We need to be aware. That's something that did not come up in the film that we saw. The world is changing very, very quickly, and we need to be aware of it. And if people can't take ownership of their own destiny, of their own future, they will become prisoners of those who go faster than them. Open source software today accounts for much more source code production than private proprietary software, and we can very quickly overtake conventional industries. The idea is to find a way to build institutions, social standards, social practices that will help people produce and share innovation in a way that will make them stronger than companies that tend to internalize knowledge. When we talk about open source software, people tend to think that it's more complicated, it's not as user-friendly, and it's better to go for industrial software because they're designed to be user-friendly, and the others are they require more effort. Is it still true? Well, this afternoon we saw a very clear example of that. Richard Stallman wanted to talk to us. He was supposed to talk to us, and he wanted to use another. He didn't want to use Skype. He wanted to use another open source software, and we didn't find a solution. So we all went to have a coffee. Some solutions are very efficient. Open source solutions, like Linux, for example, or Apache. 80% of web servers are open source, so that speaks volumes. Another example, Mac OS, works on the basis of open source software, FreeBSD, and it's much more reliable than Windows. So in some situations, yes, open source software has brought much more reliability. The hackathon is co-organized by the Le Temps newspaper and the FIFDH. So the hackathon was about having people with different skills to meet a challenge in a limited period of time and come up with an application or a piece of software, or at least a prototype, that will help solve a challenge. There were 7 challenges today. Amnesty International Switzerland set the challenge to create an open access database on the gender-based violence. Coalition for Women in Journalism asked you to create a tool that can emulate attacks against women journalists. Then you had to create a platform on healthcare. Then there were two challenges, one on direct democracy and another one on challenges and pitfalls of artificial intelligence for humanitarian purposes. And the Lausanne University team focused on finding a system to protect our own, the traces that we leave on the internet. That's a way to have people to look at complex issues, and in a couple of hours, they start drafting an answer to these issues. Charles, how many people participated in this hackathon, and what was the atmosphere like?
There were 42 participants, and this is a quite digital number. 4 to 8 participants per team, and it was very concentrated work, since we had only 3 hours, which spent like 10 minutes on dealing with very complicated topics. So we were grouped, concentrated on our goals, and somebody woke us up saying, be careful, there is only 1 hour left, so you have to think about what you are going to tell within 3 minutes at the end. And we had 1 hour more work, and it was 2 minutes left, and then it was finished. So, and what did you tell at the end? Because within 3 hours you couldn't develop the app to be downloaded on your cell phone. Yes, it was just having getting ideas. It was not even prototypes. There were different proposals of prototypes, but in such a short time, it was quite a good result. And this proposal of a platform to denounce a case of sexual harassment, which tell the person who is facing such a situation what is her right, and would also collect data for databases. And so our aim is to use crowdsourcing and in artificial intelligence for humanitarian goals. So we thought about one platform to identify, as the mayor just said, the person across the world who could help in a situation of a disaster in a part of the world, and another artificial intelligence which would be able to sort out the relevant of different messages circulating on internet, and the result of those two artificial intelligence would allow a quick response to a disaster. So of course, you have the idea, but then you have to realize it. What was the profile of the participants? There were not so many geeks, about 10 to 15%. Many people came from different humanitarian organizations, many students, researchers, and I was with an engineer of the Geneva airport. And this was quite about 10 to 15% geeks, techs. And the ideas which have come out today, are they going to be followed up? And is those who launched the challenge, so-called, are those going to go on with the work? So some people were asked to come to the Open Geneva group to try to go on working on this prototype and to push it ahead. What is the Empowerment Foundation? It's an NGO which is recognized of public usefulness, and they are activists for a technology which is at the service of mankind instead of using mankind. And it goes through awareness building of the public about this technology, and then to also to sit with legislators to have some rules and to remain in respect the human rights. You said Open Geneva is not only an association, it's also a festival which is going to take place next week. It's a festival, a hackathon, many different hackathons which are going to take place in Geneva, across Geneva. It's the foundation is made of people who said we are going to make the Paleo Festival of Innovation, and it was a very spontaneous thing. It was created in 2017, and we had about 21 hackathons being organized in different institutions with about around 400 innovators, and we decided to repeat that in 2018. And we have 800 innovators. We are the greatest event in Switzerland of innovation and co-creation. We don't care about that. What is important, we created kind of a dynamic so that people, all the citizens of Geneva, of the canton of Geneva, the big Geneva, up to Lausanne, no problem, would say, okay, I want to contribute. There is a problem I'm interested in, linked to mobility, to medicine, to scientific issues, or prosthetics, neurosciences. So it's a hackathon for all these persons somewhere, and this is the Open Geneva. So next week, and end of next week, we'll have about 31 hackathons going from robots to artificial intelligence to mobility, health care, also in hospital. You have also this experience of a hackathon. Today, the atmosphere was quite constructive and agreeable. Can hackathon also have a bad atmosphere? Yes. The one who is organizing the hackathon must be ready to take risks. Take the risk that nobody comes, take the risk that people make a revolution. What is the strength of this hackathon is this chaos and this serendipity. Of course, you have some people in the organization to prevent its failure, and this is a bit our work to help. When we come and help the film festival to make a hackathon, we try to make that it is peaceful. We tried to make a hackathon in September with the mayor of Geneva, and there were groups where the tension was quite strong. But you can always draw a lesson on the human aspects or on scientific aspects. Thank you. So if somebody wants to take part to this hackathon next week in Geneva, what does this person have to do? The inscriptions are nearly closed because so many people want to take part. But if you go to on this website opengeneva.org, you have the program. We'll have conferences on Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, and Thursday for a larger audience, for open so that people can be aware of what is happening. I would like to know something. I'm a bit provocative, maybe. There was a polemic about the hackathons, saying that you make people work for free, and the one who organizes or sponsorizes keeps the best idea, and the guy go home without nothing. It's a very good question, and what I can see, the companies who organized that in the past, they didn't take it in paradise. There comes a moment where the companies nowadays and it will be the case in future. What will be their competitivity is to recruit the best talents. It's not only people who have technical skills, but also people who have human skills. Because our main partner, I'm not going to mention him, this partner, because I don't want to make advertisement. But those they have engineers coming to Geneva, and they teach them the soft skills, and they send their engineers in our hackathons in order for them to learn how to improve the society with soft skills. And it's important that somebody of the generation Y or Z wants to have a decent salary and want to work in a company where they have pleasure to work. And you have also to have this ethical dimension, and this is very important for the company. If you start by exploiting people when you recruit them, it's a bad start. So we saw last year we had a great partner, Oracle, who made a big hackathon, and they said, everything you do during the hackathon belongs to you. We don't want to keep anything. They had other goals. So we're trying to brief the companies so that they do not do this mistake. But of course, you have always companies who do not understand it well.
So next week, the Geneva Hackathon Festival. Thank you very much. Can you stay with me before I thank our partners? It was a very long and interesting session. We went from one language to the next. I would like to thank the Le Temps newspaper, the Saint Geneva Airport, the Even Innes Ultramar Foundation, Open Geneva. And this concludes our evening. Thank you for staying with us. And maybe see you again next week. Thank you.
Mais après, oui, absolument. Je ne savais pas qu'elle avait... Elle a tous mes coordonnées. Elle est partie quand on a depuis longtemps. Salut. Laisse-moi aller chercher ma veste, c'est là. C'est pour la sorte de ça. D'accord. Oui. Megan, I will be out there. Just go behind to get my stuff. Oui.